Hello, Internet. Welcome to episode 301 of the Assorted Calibers podcast. The second podcast is a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd. With me tonight is the greatest hostess in the known universe, Aaron Paulette. How you doing, Aaron?
I have received my official notification that I am old. And I know you're gonna, oh no, you couldn't possibly. But I went to go see the optometrist last week because my eyes are, I started wearing glasses in second grade, just to give you an idea of how bad my eyes are. And I've had to get a new prescription every year. There's never been a case where it's like, oh no, your eyes are fine, you can keep the same prescription. Nope, always has to be updated. But yeah, I've been having all sorts of problems, and, I'm constantly readjusting them, and I'm thinking I'm probably going to need to get bifocals. And then, so the optometrist says, yeah, I noticed you're starting to get some cataracts. The eye condition for old people. And it was explained to me that a cataract is essentially a wrinkle on the retina. And so just as you get wrinkles as you get older, so do your eyes. And so a long enough timeline, if you live long enough, everyone's going to get cataracts. But still, I'm really possessive of my sight. I would rather be deaf than blind, just to put it in that perspective. And so it's like, oh great, I've got cataracts. There's nothing I can do about it. Fantastic. Yeah, I know it could be worse. It could be like glaucoma or macular degeneration, but still, it's just it really threw me for a loop for a while. It's one thing to face your mortality. It's a second to face your physical degradation, and it's just, oh crap. Yeah, that's really sobering. So that's been my week. I didn't get to go on a vacation out of state like you did, Weer'd.
I did. I will say real quickly, it was my mom's birthday this weekend, and so we took her up to our place in New Hampshire, and it's in Lincoln, New Hampshire, and my parents have been taking me to Lincoln, New Hampshire since I was small, and so they were just so happy just to be there, and it's a little rental unit that we've got, and so it's nice. We had a good time. And we did lots of hiking, and my daughter swam in the river. It was warm out. It was not that warm. She crazy. But I will say one thing. My father, even on this weekend, was mentioning, because he's been going nuts about the fact he actually just had his cataracts corrected last year. And now for the first time in I don't know how long, he no longer has a glasses restriction on his driver's license. And so he is very, very pleased about that, especially since I don't think he ever really liked wearing glasses, but he's got a condition. I think I've got it too, because I've had a lot of problems with my eyes, is that contacts irritate his eyes. And so he gets cysts and stuff on his eyelids if he wears contacts. So essentially the doctor just said, after removing the fifth cyst in so many years, said, you know what? Don't wear those anymore. And so he's been wearing glasses for probably the last, I don't know, 20 years, and now he doesn't wear glasses anymore, and he loves it. So
must be nice to have health insurance.
Yeah. Well, we can start a GoFundMe. Once they are ripe, they need to be ripe, as I've heard. So you go for a while with cataracts, and then after a while they get to a point where they can fix them, and then they fix them, and then they also put a artificial lens in your eye, and it'll match whatever your prescription is, so you can put the glasses on the shelf.
Okay, I just the thought of surgery on my eye makes me all sorts of squeamish and uncomfortable.
I don't believe you're awake for that one. For LASIK, you are, and that is I 100% are with you. I wanted to get LASIK surgery, especially when I was a fisheries observer, because when you are out in the elements and there's salt water splashing on your glasses, they're not really doing you much good. And so I would often not be wearing them. And my vision's not horrible. It's getting worse because I too am getting older, Aaron. When you say, "Oh, Aaron, you're not old," I was like, "Aaron, I'm old, and I know you're older than me." So yeah, there's
you're only allowed to say that because I brought it up.
Yes, yes. I'm just. I will find more tactful times to joke about you being the young kid.
Yeah, thank you.
But yes, we are both gray old farts. So yeah, that's that. I'm going for my annual checkup tomorrow, and we're gonna schedule some butt stuff. So that's gonna happen. My wife has her colonoscopy scheduled as well, and so she's wondering who will get theirs first. And so we're kind of gonna have a race.
Oh. Do it as a couples event, date night. You can hold hands.
That might be fun, except for the fact that I know that my mom has been getting colonoscopies since either her late 30s or early 40s, because there has been some risk factors in my family. It's far enough away from me that it doesn't apply to me because nobody actually ever got colon cancer in my immediate family, So I'm just going at the regular 45 timeline, and but my mom telling my dad, if you think you got to fart, go sit on the toilet to fart. And so it really wouldn't be that much of a couples event because we'd be on different floors because we'd want to both be near a bathroom.
So on that tasteful remark, let's close down the banter and get into our main topics.
Let's get on to the main. I think that's a brilliant idea, Aaron. We both didn't have any topics, so we asked the ACP crew to throw some stuff at us, and these are the ones that made the cut. And this first one is all kinds of bonkers. Do you want to take it, or do you want me to?
Oh, is this because you didn't read it?
I absolutely read it. I absolutely read it. I for those the people, I don't think I mentioned it in the blooper reel, but I was cutting a blooper reel just before this because I've been away all weekend. So so I wasn't sure if I was going to get a chance to read them all, but I did get a chance to. So thank you to my wife because she did bedtime.
So yeah, this story I can't really do it justice, and I'm sure Weer'd is going to interrupt. I mean, help. And so the story is titled "How Gold Becomes Guns," and it starts out with a gold heist at a Canadian airport, which, as the article says, sounds like it could have been made as part of a movie. And so a year ago, 20 Canadian dollars. So 20 million Canadian dollars, or 14.5 million American dollars, worth of gold bars were stolen from the Toronto airport in Canada. And I actually think this is far more interesting than the rest of it. And so what happened was the perpetrators, the robbers, the ones who were pulling off the heist, I can't really say heisters. So that much gold is 880 pounds. And they stole that gold just 42 minutes after it was unloaded off of a plane that had arrived from Switzerland. And so that gold, that 880 pounds of gold, was unloaded, was put into a cargo facility, and then the thieves loaded it into a large white cargo truck and just drove away. And I think that's the most interesting part of it all.
I mean, it's super interesting because I was just trying to find it while you were talking, and I can't, because as I was reading this story, I'm like, I read this story. I want to say I heard it on, or I've heard this story before. I want to say I heard it on Darknet Diaries, or maybe that chapter. but I wasn't able to track it down just in the amount of time, and I'm not going to spend the whole show looking. But I know that there was like a true crime podcast or something that had this heist in there, and it is very, very impressive, especially given like how much the gold weighs. Moving that much around is very similar to, I know Ian McCollum did a 2-gun shoot with it recreating the bank heist from Heat, and noting how much those duffel bags full of cash would weigh. So yeah, it is the logistics are much more complicated than Grand Theft Auto would lead you to believe.
Mm-hmm. And for people who are wondering, yes, this was an inside job. There were 2 Air Canada employees that were in on it, and they've been arrested for the theft and for conspiracy. But the reason that we're talking about this here on a Second Amendment podcast is that it does have to do with guns. And I don't remember when this person was arrested. I can't find it in the article. But police in Pennsylvania, here we go, last September, they arrested a 25-year-old Canadian man, and when they arrested him, well, they say stopped by police, so it sounds like it was a traffic infraction. But when they arrested him, they found dozens of guns from Florida and Georgia in his possession, and they later allege that he's the one who drove the getaway truck. And so he had entered the U.S. illegally, and at least some of the gold was brought into the U.S. and then sold, or perhaps sold in Canada. But the point being, they used the proceeds in order to come into the United States to buy guns and then smuggle them into Canada, because we know that Canada is very restrictive on firearm ownership, and especially when it comes to pistols. And so there's a statement here, something like how a gun that is sold for $500 in America can be sold for $5,000 in Canada, which, just for a moment, had me rethinking my life choices.
Well, I will
but
say
that would be wrong.
They also note that massive price increase happened after Pierre Trudeau, not Pierre, this is dad, Justin Trudeau, Justin Trudeau did the possibly illegal additional restrictions on firearms after the Nova Scotia shooting. And the Nova Scotia shooting allegedly was from guns illegally imported into the United States. But that's the last any of us has ever heard about that. And he had like police uniforms and all sorts of stuff that was indicating that he was quite friendly with the police. That I have my doubts, because you would think, especially since this shooting happened during Biden's reign, and Biden has wanted to do anything he can to restrict gun ownership. And of course, Biden was vice president under Fast and Furious, which the whole purpose of that was to blame the United States gun shops for international crime. And so I would find it hard to believe that if in fact it was a U.S. gun shop that illegally sold the guns, that, number one, we would know the name of the shop, or at least the town in Maine where it came from. And then two, that this would be a political talking point, and there's no such thing. So I'm going to call a lot of lies when it comes to the Canadian officials.
Well, one of the things that I speculated when we were chatting about this beforehand was I was curious what the time to crime on these were, because the chief, I want to say RCMP, back in 2023, he said like 90% of handguns recovered after violent crimes in Ontario were traced back to the U.S. And goes on to say that the top states that these guns come from are Ohio, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. And, some are stolen while others are bought using straw purchasers. And I'm just curious if this follows the American model of time to crime or if it's different.
Yeah, it's hard to say, because in America, guns are kind of ubiquitous. And so therefore, obviously, we have documentation of criminals being interviewed, and most of them either buy them from black market sellers who are generally dealing in stolen firearms, or there are the straw buyers, but again, most straw buyers are only buying like one gun for one person, because of all of our enhanced anti-straw buying stuff, and gun shops are of course also being wary of such things. And then, and then further, you might just have friends and relatives who legally own guns, and you can just say, hey, can I get a hold of that? Or maybe I can ask for forgiveness after I borrow it so that it doesn't get reported stolen. But either way, in Canada, there might be more organized crime methodologies being used to bring guns into Canada, very similar to how they're done in places like England, where when illegal guns show up, a lot of them are full auto because they're being smuggled in through military channels, through, various stuff like the Ukrainian mob and stuff like that. So yeah, it's hard to say. The people who are smuggling these guns in might actually have the ability to like rob railroad cars and things like that.
That was a heck of a jump from gun smuggling to railroad robbery.
Well, I mean, that's certainly something that's happened on multiple occasions, especially in the Chicago area. On the people have hit railroad cars that are shipping guns to big box gun stores. And
okay. I'm sorry. I was thinking the traditional Western, get onto the car and then start robbing the passengers.
That would be awesome, but unfortunately, most of the railroad car robberies that happen are when the train is in the stockyard, waiting to be switched over to different trains, and all of that. And
I can't find the article because I don't remember when I saw it, let alone where, but I do know that Atlanta, being a railroad nexus, has a lot of trains coming through there, and there's footage of just the area around it are littered with ripped open Amazon boxes. And I don't know how these thieves are getting access. I don't know if the trains are parked there or if they're going slow enough, but package theft via train in Atlanta is a real thing, and that specific article I saw was that at least one shipment of guns went missing from that area. And so what I'm getting at is not just a Canadian problem. I don't know how widespread it is across the country, but yeah, anything that arrives by train through Atlanta, I'm curious what the percentage chance is of it arriving safely.
Yeah, I just posted in the show notes a story from 2017 of let's see, a federal judge on Tuesday sentenced a Chicago street gang member to 10 years behind bars for stealing more 100 newly minted guns from a Norfolk Southern yard, saying such thefts have contributed to epidemic of gun violence in the city. And I will note that Chicago is very, very near to Canada.
Yep.
So it certainly could be that way as well. Again, these trains, I know for a fact that many of the companies have switched to enhanced security of the rail cars to make them extra secure from theft. But of course, anybody who follows the Lockpicking Lawyer channel knows that there's always another way to get in, and a possibility that the enhanced security will be the enhanced security will add to the inquiry on, what's in that one. I know that as a CNR holder, there has been many a time when a courier has handed me a large, heavy box and said, "There's rifles in here, isn't there?" Why on earth would you say that? Well, there. I think, have we done that one to death?
I think so. And
Okay.
so you were talking about enhanced security, and now we've got dumb regulation about enhanced body armor right up there with ghost guns. What's that about, Weer'd?
Yeah. So New York, which already has heavy restrictions on civilians owning body armor. They've now been proposed by lawmakers. Who is it?
Meng and Kennedy.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. Back in 2022, New York State banned the purchase, sale, and actually I looked. You weren't prohibited from having it if you'd already bought it. And the crime was, you had to be committing another crime while wearing the body armor. But that was just at the state level. But now there are two Congress critters. What are their names? Meng and Kennedy. Representatives Grace Meng and Timothy Kennedy. But the point being is that while these are representatives from New York State, they are United States representatives, and so they're trying to do this at the national level.
I missed that part.
It's so much worse. And so, this bill would prohibit the sale, transfer, or possession of enhanced body armor by civilians with exemptions for law enforcement, military personnel. Enhanced body armor is level 3 and up. So anything that would stop a rifle round.
Mm-hmm.
And they claim that it is to protect people because, we've had a few mass shooters that have been wearing body armor, and they specifically reference the killer at the Top supermarket in Buffalo, because they literally introduced the bill on the second anniversary of that, and they mentioned that this particular scumbag was wearing armor, and so when the security guard, who was armed with a pistol, opened fire, it wasn't able to penetrate the ballistic armor that was rated for rifle rounds, and so clearly we need to ban this. And I view the possession of ballistic armor in exactly the same way that I view the possession of knives and firearms and things like that. Just because some people abuse it doesn't mean that owning it is wrong. And I believe it was Hopalong Ginsburg on some sort of social media who said, laws that restrict the wearing of body armor are saying, quote, someday the state might want to kill you and we can't have you making it harder for them, unquote. So, that's how I feel. I don't know how much traction this is going to get. I would hope that it gets shot down, but I don't know. I wish I could say, well, if you're thinking about getting ballistic protection, get some now, because you don't know when you'll be able to get it. I don't know if it'll be outlawed. If you do have it, keep it quiet. Yeah,
and I've got to say that I got to wonder about some of these. I never heard anything. Certainly the Buffalo one, there certainly are reports that the security guard did land a shot on the shooter, and it was stopped by the vest. But in some instances, they're saying here, there's Sutherland Springs, Texas. I don't remember hearing anything about the guy wearing armor. And a matter of fact, Stephen Williford was really just kind of taking pot shots of the guy because he shot him in his vehicle, and he ended up managing to essentially fatally wound the guy.
Well, keep in mind that the same journalists who, call every pistol a Glock don't understand the difference between a clip and a magazine. They will frequently report a gunman as wearing body armor when they were just, in fact, wearing a load-bearing vest.
Correct. There's many instances where, for sure, such as the shooting in the Virginia Tech, that killer wore a load-bearing vest, and it was described as body armor because, well, most plate carriers are load-bearing vests that have plate carrier pouches for the ballistic plates. And in this case, it was just a load-bearing vest with no plate carrier. Or in some cases, they had plate carriers with no plates in them. So they may have been wearing a plate carrier, so therefore they were wearing a ballistic vest, but it didn't have the plates in it, so it wasn't ballistically rated. So, and I know that that Matt from Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns and I kind of got into it talking about this the other day, and essentially pointing out the fact that he pointed out to multiple articles where the Aurora, Colorado shooter was stated to have ballistic armor. But I noted the fact that I understood and respected that he found multiple articles citing that he was caught with ballistic armor. But I would note that the press has lied so much about ballistic armor that unless you are giving me like the make and model of ballistic armor, then I'm not believing you, because they have lied so much in the past. So I don't even know how much of this is true. Certainly, like I said, the Buffalo shooting, I haven't dug too deep into it to find, say, what the make, model, and the armor rating. Granted, he was only engaged with a pistol, so it wasn't necessarily enhanced body armor, quote unquote. It might have been a level 2A vest, and that's more than enough to stop a .357 Magnum. So, yeah, they're all lying, and again, ballistic armor, just like silencers, suppressors are not, magic whisper murder tools. They still do make noise. And ballistic armor, yes, it can stop rounds. Aaron Paulette is, of course, a huge fan of shotgun slugs for this exact reason.
So Weer'd, can I actually you?
Yes.
So you said level 2A armor stopping a .357 Magnum, and
Yes.
that is incorrect.
Okay.
Level 2A is only rated for 180 grain 40 Smith & Wesson FMJ.
Okay.
You have to be full level 2 to withstand the .357 Magnum.
Understood.
And see, I thought this might be an issue. I wrote many articles about ballistic armor on blue collar prepping, and there's one that I thoroughly researched called Levels of Protection. And so for people who are curious as to what these mean, I'm going to post it in the show notes. Oh,
thank you so much.
Yep.
But either way, the point of the matter is that landing shots on someone who is armored is not it's not just going to bounce off of them and they're not even going to notice. It is definitely going to be unpleasant and not something that they want, and it will definitely change their train of thought. Furthermore, headshots, generally people are not wearing ballistic helmets, and of course the ultimate, shoot them in the dick. If somebody is taking hits to the center of mass and they are not going down, obviously the Mozambique drill the original concept was designed for people who were twisted on drugs and so therefore unable to feel and react to pain like a normal human would, and so therefore a headshot would take them down. Also, a headshot will, if you put two into their ballistic vest and it doesn't seem to do anything, a shot to the head generally will do it. But if you don't think that you've got that headshot, a shot to the pelvic girdle can be just as fatal as a shot through the lung, and it'll also completely wreck their mobility, and it will definitely wreck their outlook on life.
Yes, and in fact, Masada Ayub talks in glowing terms about Jim Cirillo's book Tales of the Stakeout Squad, and that was about Cirillo's service with New York City's police stakeout unit in, I want to say, the 70s. I'm not entirely certain.
I think it was the 70s to the early 80s, but I'm just spitballing here.
And so one of the things that Cirillo and his partner determined was, and I believe that they used a shotgun, you just shoot them right in the hip and they're going to go down. And even if they aren't removed from the fight, I mean, you have damaged something load-bearing. And the pelvis, the hip, it's not exactly the center of the mass, but it's a whole lot easier to hit than a head.
Yeah, and I forget the perk in Call of Duty, what it's called. It's been a little while, but I know there's one perk in PvP where when you get fatally wounded, you fall on your back, but you can still kind of move around a little bit and possibly get some revenge shots in. this Life 8 video games, when your hip just got turned into hamburger by buckshot, or even someone threaded a 9mm into the ball of your femur, it's possible that the person can return fire, and one should be wary of that. But it takes a very special person, possibly one twisted on mind-altering drugs, to continue a fight after that.
Well, yeah, that is true. On the other hand, when they fall to the ground, it's going to be a lot harder for them to shoot at you. So capitalize on your temporary advantage.
Correct. Also, another statement is, I know a friend of mine was on the local police force for a little while, and he mentioned that they teach officers to shoot in a squared off isosceles stance, so that their plate carrier is presented directly towards the threat, versus a civilian will often teach to give you a bladed shoot. So either, the advanced isosceles, or like a Weaver stance, where the body is turned and bladed so that you've got less of a cross section for incoming fire. And the whole point is that cross section that you have, the side of the body, is also generally not something that's going to be armored. So either way.
Well, I mean, unless you have side plates, but
yeah, those
are unusual.
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, there's also groin plates, which could protect the pelvic girdle. They exist, but as a general rule, number one, they're not very common. Two, they're an extra level. Number three, they limit your mobility, so a lot of people aren't going to wear them. So again, there are ways around this. This is not a this is not an end all be all. And the bottom line is that we talk about rogue government. We talk about the potential that a government might be bad, where, the many, many, many nations have befallen to tyrannical governments that have gone out and killed their people. There are governments doing it right now. And so the idea of the government banning armor, Hapalon Gisberg said, it'll make them easier for them to kill you when they get around to it. Yeah, I don't like the idea. I think people should be able to have armor, both for personal protection. The idea, I've definitely heard of people that, have a load bearing vest with armor in it for something goes bump in the night, quickly throw the vest on, and it's got a gun and magazines directly on it. And so you've got everything you need, flashlight, that sort of stuff. You could now go to the fight and you're armored. I also know a ton of people who are range officers, either for shooting ranges or for shooting sports, that wear plate carriers while they are refereeing, because they are there to deal with safety violations. And if somebody is flagging, people of safety, you stop them, because if you accidentally shoot that gun, it could kill somebody, and you're the one walking up on them. The chances of you catching a round are much higher than anybody else. So why not wear a piece of armor?
So last week for our 300th episode, I mentioned that we had something cool in the making as we discussed the events of the NRA annual meeting. And 1 week later, here we are. We have an interview with Amanda Suffecool, one of the directors of the NRA, who called Charles Cotton on his BS.
I am pleased to welcome, I believe back, we just had a discussion before on, I believe Amanda Suffecool has been on the Assorted Calibers podcast before, but we've been friends for so long, it's hard to remember what's going on. But again, we're welcoming Amanda Suffecool. And of course, if you didn't know, she is of course was it regional coordinator? You just told me.
Regional director
of the DC project, and Eye on the Target Radio, and also a board member of the NRA, if you didn't already know that, but because we've been talking about this. And this is really the reason why I wanted to have you on, because we all saw your your wonderful work at the members meeting, especially given all of the let's say administrative shenanigans that were going on during that. And so that you did great work. I don't think there's any inside baseball that hasn't already been published on the internet. Would you say so?
Yeah. Well, except for my radio partner Rob, it's like just chill. And I was like, I'm good. I'm not. I had no intention of speaking. I really didn't. And then I sat there and I looked at him and I'm like, I'm going in. and then you guys saw it from there. So yeah.
You came in like the cavalry. Look, I'm going to call for the vote.
Well, and I felt really bad for the people standing in line. I mean, I looked at the clock. I knew that there was a 12 o'clock hard stop. And so there was multiple people standing in line. And I looked at him and I was like, we're going to run out of time. And I apologize, but I'm going to call for the vote.
Yeah.
And they were saying, run with it,
I guess I'm just going to give on just your pure speculation. Do you think that they were running the clock out on the vote? Do you think that maybe if you hadn't called for the vote, they would have just let the people talk back and forth and then moved it on?
Well, yeah, 12 o'clock, we're dead. We're done.
Yep.
Do I think so? Yes. Look at the resolutions that came before this one. They were intended to burn up the full 2 hours.
So you agree with the members of ACP that we did in episode 300, where we're just like, yeah, no, though there was shenanigans afoot.
Well, see, the second level of shenanigans to that was that the text of that vote was then to box the board members in to say the members have voted and we need to move, so that we were pinned on another side without information. So it was multifaceted. Do not discount the politics behind a lot of stuff that happens in this board, and frankly in any major corporation board.
Oh yeah.
You just have to be on point, or you just you're like, well, what just happened, right? So yeah.
And it's my understanding that there might have also been, I think it was Rob Pincus who really kind of put the feet to the fire on that one, on the, was it so much as a member's request as a member endorsed board request?
Well, there was that. I mean, when you really look, because there were 3 board members, then Rob Pincus, and I'm not discounting Rob by any means, but each person built on the last person, working their way up. And so it was an inadvertent, unplanned team effort that I got to fire the last crescendo, if you will, of it all. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's a case of great minds think alike. Once somebody gets going, and like you said, you weren't thinking about speaking, but you heard this other stuff and go, oh wait, now I'm thinking about speaking.
Right. So
I think the thing that we really need from you here on ACP is what happened on the following Monday with the closed board meeting.
Okay. Well, there were a couple things that happened, because the board meeting was open. And it is open to the members until they go into executive session. And so executive session really is intended to talk strategy, to talk legal, and to talk deep level finance. Things that if our enemies got a hold of them, they could do us harm. Those are what executive session is for. But for the regular day-to-day things, the board meeting is open to the members. And so, but when you go in there, you cannot take your phone. You can't go past this line. There's a variety of different rules of things, and Robert's Rules of Order run the whole thing. So we got in there. So the first thing that happens, and this is a lesson for me, is I don't wear a watch. I use my phone. Well, my phone gets locked into one of those little cages that, are locked, and then they hand them back to you. There were so many people in the audience that they used all of the cages for all the phones. And so people were getting coat claim tickets for their phones because they had to turn them in, get them bagged, and they stayed with security outside the room. So that told you that the absolute audience was clear full. And we get in, we start to look at the agenda. So two things. One is the nominating committee makes recommendations. So this is a group, nominating committee is made up of 6 board members and 3 life members of the NRA who are non-board members. So it's board and members, board and public, board and, board and interested parties kind of thing. So the nominating committee's nominations came through at, breakfast was at 7. The meeting started at 9, and the nominations came through at 6:08 a.m. So we had 50 minutes to look at those while we were getting ready to head down to breakfast. And once you headed down to breakfast, then it was breakfast, and then you had to hike across because it was in the convention hall itself. So there was no going back to your room. Blah, blah. I mean, you could, but it was pretty tight in all the timing and all the stuff. So we get there. Now we've got the nomination list of what the nominating committee wants to nominate. And we also get the agenda. And you see the agenda, and they intend that the voting for officers go in executive session. And I and many others are saying, well, what is the audience here for if not to see who's voted in as officers? And why that does not meet the financial, that does not meet the strategic or the legal. So why is it an executive session? So it took us almost an hour to negotiate the modifications to the agenda so that it was acceptable to everybody as to what to do. And we ended up with setting it, because if you go into executive session, you chase everybody out of the room and they have to stand out in the hallway. So we set it to where the elections happened before we went into executive session. And then we actually had a secondary vote that said we will go into executive session after everything else is covered, so that when we go into executive session, everybody can go back to their room and feel confident to know that nothing else is going to happen that is truly interesting to them, or that is action that needs to be reported on, etc. And so there was that. And then we made somewhat of a history. The meeting was 12.25 hours long. And so we were there for, we'll just say, all darn day.
That sounds like 40 miles of bad road if I ever heard of it.
Oh, man, it was like, it's all good. It's all interesting. You had to be on your game the entire time, but 12 hours of truly actively listening to everything that was happening and paying attention to everything is really hard. We're wired for squirrel. What's next? What's going to catch our attention? And that 12 hours was a long, hard road. Yeah. So
I gotta ask. So we have been. I'm a life member of the NRA, and there's many of the members of ACP are members of the NRA, but we have been extremely critical of the NRA in the past, especially given all of this scandal with Wayne LaPierre and the various people and the defrauding and defuncting and putting the Second Amendment second, ironically, turn of phrase. And we've been cheering on the various reform candidates that have been getting into the into the board of directors, but of course also we're seeing again procedural stuff that's going on that definitely seems to be gamesmanship, and that was certainly a lot of the things that kept Wayne LaPierre in the position where he could do the damage that he was doing for as long as he did. I concur. I see it. There is that. So, but I think there's a couple things. One is, I think that a lot of the board members were not looking at things with an analytical eye. They were looking at things with, it's all good. They're out to get us. It's really not true. And honestly, even before I was on the board, I justified in my head a lot of the stuff that was being reported, because when you looked at what was happening between the NRA and Ackerman McQueen, it was almost like it was a divorce that was a very, very caustic divorce where both sides were fighting for custody of the children, and we, the members, were the children,
right? And so when you looked at it that way, it was like, oh, okay, so who's reporting it, and what do they have to gain by the reporting? And so there was that, and so I could see in a lot of cases where these board members have given their lives to be on the NRA board. They've given their time, their talent, their treasure. You know, they you don't just walk in and say, I want to be on the board. It's you have to have been doing Second Amendment work on a pretty high level to be considered in the first place. And so when you walk in and your first inclination is, I just joined this amazing organization and they tell me something and I'm going to believe them. And so I see that. So I don't know that I am as critical of some of the stuff. And then I can see that it is a very political animal. So I'm not going to paint this by what happened yesterday. More so now it's like, okay, these things have come out. You should see them. They've hit the light of day. They've been proven, absolutely proven. They're not somebody painting them with a colored brush. They are proven in the court of law. They are testified to. So now you're seeing that stuff. So if you choose not to see that, then I blame you. But prior to that, if you really didn't have an opportunity to see that, I'm not sure I did. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And that leads on to essentially my next question, and really kind of the pinnacle question.
Uh-huh.
So from your professional opinion, Amanda Suffecool, do you believe that the NRA is healing after, we'll just call it a disease, or do you believe that it may be a house in decline?
Oh no, I absolutely. I've told people in the first place when I got on the board, they were like, "Well, why now? You know, it's a mess. Why now?" And I said, "Well, you know, somebody has to be there to catch the baby when it falls." Mm-hmm. And so I believe that this New York court case, it's brought out things that we didn't know, and so that's an interesting spin. But don't discount the fact that New York was out to kill us, and that is off the table. They have not been successful in the things that they intended to do. So the NRA has, when New York came after them, they stopped marketing. They focused all their time and energy in not being disbanded. Because think about what would happen if they disbanded a not-for-profit in New York. The end goal is if they disband you, you do not get to take your assets. Those go to other not-for-profits, like-minded not-for-profits. So had New York been successful, Bloomberg, the Demanding Mommies, all of those organizations would have split up the assets of the NRA. And so are we there? No. Have we persevered past that? Yes. Were we in a tough spot? Yes. Did we stop marketing 6 years ago? Yes. So any company that stops marketing for 6 years, stops communicating with its members in a meaningful way, is in decline. And I believe that shift is happening in 2024, that you will start to see us, you will start to hear us, you will start to hear. The NRA continued to do good things in the courts. They just never talked about them. They did not, think about it. The NRA was behind the Bruen decision. How much marketing did they do on the NRA brought you Bruen? They didn't. Yet Bruen is going to be the gift that keeps on giving. It's that kind of thing. So it really is now sitting back and going back to the block and tackling of how do you run an organization? How do you market an organization? How do you stay in the public eye? And those types of things. So with our new officers, Bob Barr, Bill Bockenberg, and Mark Vaughn. So with our new 3 officers, they're going to really focus on those things. And as soon as we get out of this New York trial, and it is slated to finish the midsummer, then I believe that you're going to see a lot of it. And they have set a goal for us already that says that 2030, we want to have 10 million members. So you will see a marketing campaign that really, really drives in that direction.
Well, that is good to hear. We've talked about in the past on ACP that if the NRA was to fall either through dissolution, through enemy action, or just being a house in decline, that there are other organizations that could pick up the various pieces that the NRA handles, but those sums would not equal the whole of the NRA. And I'm glad to hear that you are optimistic about it.
Well, when you look at it, look at those other organizations and then look at the size of the NRA versus those other organizations. In its heyday, the NRA was 300 times larger than the next organization because they're so multifaceted. They're in so many different directions. When you talk to members about the NRA, their NRA is different than your NRA that's different than my NRA. As a pistol shooter versus a competitive shooter versus an instructor versus somebody who does the friend stuff versus somebody who does youth stuff. When you really start to look at it that way, it is a behemoth. And I have talked to people in those other organizations who say that, one of the advantages to them of having the NRA in their corner is that the NRA takes all the hits or takes a lot of the hits and allows them the freedom to do what they're doing. If the NRA's gone, they're going to go after these smaller organizations who do not have the deep pockets to withstand a lawsuit where the government is using the government's money and the organization is using the organization's money.
Yeah, no, again, I am very, very heartened to hear that you are optimistic about it. And I think that it'll be much harder for anyone to continue some of the more detrimental behaviors that we saw in the past. And it'll behoove everyone to get back to the basics, to the NRA that we knew back when things were much darker for the Second Amendment. And hopefully we'll get a lot more positive results thanks to them. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Amanda Suffecool, and you can check her out on Eye of the Target Radio.
Well, thank you for having me, and make the invite a little sooner the next time, right? So that there's not these giant gaps that we don't even remember the time frame.
That is true.
So thanks for having me.
Thank you.
So let me just say that, okay, on the one hand, I am surprised, but on the other hand, I'm not really, because Amanda is very proper and ladylike. She had every opportunity to say all sorts of things about what happened and about Charles Cotton, and she didn't. She stuck to the facts. And so while I am slightly disappointed we didn't get any specialty, it just reinforces my opinion of her character. She took the high road, and that's good for her. And so by doing so, it makes the person who shouted her down, or at least tried to shout her down, look that much worse.
I agree. Plus, again, this is the NRA leadership that we've got for right now. So there's really not a lot to be gaining from burning bridges at this point.
Well, I mean, the person who dissed her is no longer in that position. So.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. So yeah, justice has been done.
Justice has been done. Don't cry for him. He's already dead. But yeah, and I will say, she mentioned that people should consider coming back if you've let your membership lax, and donate if you're if you've gone through to encourage them. I'm gonna say right now, hold your water. Let's wait to see what's going on, but stand by and pay attention, because she's absolutely right. If they suddenly start getting a whole influx of members because this reform slate is doing reform things and that makes you happy, then absolutely that is the time to go back to the NRA or join for the first time, because I hope she's right. I hope they're going to save it, because again, it's it's something that even if the other groups start taking over, they're not going to be able to completely rebuild what the NRA once was. So but the NRA could.
I'm going to wait a little bit, and here's why. We speculated about Ronnie Barrett becoming president or I'm sorry, executive vice president, and he didn't get that. And the person who was elected, we all know how good I am with names. He was old guard, and so I'm a little reluctant, but everyone else behind him is a reformer, so I am cautiously optimistic, and I'm just going to wait and see what happens. And if this new guy is good, then I will consider rejoining. But right now, I'm not going to give the NRA my money based upon a promise. I need some degree of action.
And by the way, the new executive vice president is Bob Barr, and he was a former libertarian presidential candidate, I believe. There's another guy that was a Barr as well. So I might be confusing the two conservative politician.
Is
Bars.
he the one who is alleged to have had a negligent discharge?
That I hadn't heard.
I think I saw it on NRA in Danger.
Oh, found it right here.
Okay, great.
Yeah, an antique 38 caliber pistol accidentally discharged as it was being handled by U.S. Rep. Bob Barr during a reception in his honor. The bullet hit a glass door. No one was hurt.
So, as I understand the article, which I still can't find, but the person in question was showing guns to Mr. Barr, and he had been handing them to Mr. Barr to inspect, and then at one point Barr went, basically, "Oh, what's this?" and picked one up, and that was one of the ones that the gentleman kept loaded for bump in the night, and negligently discharged it, and fortunately no one was hurt. But because he was not only a member of Congress, but I think there was an election coming up, the actual events were downplayed or made to seem like the person showing him the gun didn't properly clear it. And so there was an open letter, and I can't find it now. I'll put it in the show notes, definitely. But the allegation was, everyone's saying that it's my fault, and no, it's not my fault. It's this guy's fault. He grabbed what he shouldn't have grabbed and had his finger on the trigger.
I mean, it's certainly, if Barr was holding it at the time when it discharged, it absolutely is his fault. I actually was buying a gun from a friend of mine, and he pulled it out to show it to me, and he handed it to me, and the action was closed. It was a little 25 caliber Colt, and I racked the slide back, and out popped a blue tip laser safety slug in 25 ACP. I kind of wonder what it would have done, but I'm also not willing to go down range with a catcher's mitt. But yeah, and he was mortified because he didn't think that he had it loaded, and the magazine was empty as well. And so, yeah, but he was mortified that had happened. It was just a profusely apologized to me. But again, 4 rules of gun safety. You always check the firearm to make sure that it's loaded. Actually, a friend of mine was handling at the NRA museum, handling the Savage 45 used in the pistol in the 1911 pistol trials, and he racked the slide back and locked the slide open and was like, "Oh yeah, you're not supposed to do it that way. I don't know anything about the gun to know what was wrong with it." But they were like, "Yeah, no, it's a prototype, but it doesn't really do it that way. And so we're going to put this away, and we're going to have to take it apart to get the slide closed again." And he's just like,
"Okay."
He goes, "Somebody hands me a gun that's closed. I'm going to clear it."
That's not a bad habit to have.
It's not a bad habit. No, nobody got mad at him. It was just sugar. We should have told you about that.
Yeah. Okay, so I found the article. It wasn't NRA in Danger. That's my bad. It's from No Lawyers, Only Guns and Money, by John Richardson. and the article is titled "Not Willing to Be the Fall Guy for Barr," and this was 2 weeks ago on May 18th, and the open letter was sent from Bruce Widener. So that's for people to read.
All right.
And look, I'm not trying to cast aspersions right now. It's just he said allegation, but I'm explaining why I am hesitant, and I just want to wait and see some marginal improvement before I hand over my money.
And I 100% am behind you on that. Don't go sending them money just because some reform people were elected. Again, some reform, Ollie North attempted to do some reform as well, and shenanigans were played, and his attempt was thwarted, not by honest means, by many an account. And this whole event with Amanda was clearly, there was some underhandedness, underhanded politics involved. But I will say, as the Pollyanna in me, I will note that at least Bob Barr has a story of him handling firearms. And again, my big thing about Wayne LaPierre is I don't actually get the impression he even really likes guns. So yeah, that's at least one step better. I mean, I've got some issues with the man's politics. Certainly he's not a reform candidate. He's an old guard. But we shall see what goes on. Again, the NRA is in such disarray because of Wayne LaPierre's corruption that it would even behove the most corrupt goon to actually start supporting the Second Amendment just to start getting more membership money. So we shall see.
Mm-hmm.
So another continuation from a previous show. Last we talked to Michael Soldini of Walk the Talk America. He mentioned the group does several educational classes, and I wanted to know more about them. So I am pleased to welcome back to the Assorted Calibers podcast, Michael Soldini of Walk the Talk America. And in our last meeting, you were talking about all the different training programs that you were going into, and you had so much to talk about, to tell about what your organization does. You guys do so much. But I was really curious about what sort of things are you training people in when, say, you're talking to mental health workers?
Yeah, absolutely. One of our very first pilot programs was our cultural competence course. It's called At the Intersection of Guns and Mental Health. And what that was really designed for was to educate mental health and healthcare providers about gun culture. What I noticed over the years when I first started this, or the first year in particular, was there was a lot of people that worked in the mental health space that wanted to help, didn't want to restrict, but didn't know how to help. Just like the firearms industry as a whole didn't know how to be part of the mental health conversation. We always said, well, it's a mental health issue, right? Like there's the reverse of that is on the other side, is where people are like, I'm not trying to take your guns. I just want people to be mentally healthy, and I want people to be safe and responsible when it comes to firearms, right? Which is fair. What we did is we took a course and we said, okay, how do we get people to take this course? Because we're trying to attract non-gun owners. Most people that work in healthcare, in terms of like when it comes to the mental health space, they usually aren't firearms owners, at least in our world. So what we did was we said, okay, CEU credits. Every mental health provider needs to have a certain amount of credits every year to renew their license. What if we entice them by saying, come into our world and you'll get these credits? Are you gun curious? Like, yeah, a lot of people are. And when we first started the course, I remember thinking like, okay, I don't know how many people are actually going to show up to this. And then we had a packed house, and we used to do them live. This is before COVID. And I remember the first time we did it, we had like 20 people show up. And then the end of the world happened. COVID happened. And then the whole idea was, okay, well, let's bring it online. And I remember when we brought it online, I said, this is never going to work. Like, people want to be there. And I remember the first time we threw course 1, because it's a 3-part course. We threw the first course. There was only like 80 something people that showed up, which is a lot more than I thought, right? And I was like, okay, maybe this thing does have wings. But I remember like a couple months later, we threw the second course, which was a repeat of the first one, and there was like 200 something clinicians. So word had gotten out. But what we want to do in that course, and you guys can take it, anyone can take it right now. You can go on the website and take it for free, right? So we do actually have a lot of gun people that come through because I think they are curious to see what this is all about. So many of you can teach the parts of this course because you're proficient with a firearm, you understand safety and all this stuff. But what we wanted to do is bring them into our world so they could understand gun culture. And I remember the very first course we threw, there was a mental health clinician that was in there, and we were talking about gun culture and the things we were afraid of. And I remember the person raised their hand and they were like, I never knew you were afraid of me. Like, I never even knew that. I didn't even know there was a gun culture. And I remember I was like, I laughed and I was like, yeah, it's just as big as like Star Wars culture, right? Like, we are a group of people surfing, like skateboarding, like car collectors. Like, that's what the gun community is in many ways. And it was really eye-opening for me to watch these clinicians. Many of them, because we threw this one in Nevada, and in Nevada, like, a clinician cannot have your guns taken away, right? And it was really interesting because we were telling them about the fears that we have, and it was watching them do the mental gymnastics of like, I wouldn't even know how I could get your guns, and me learning through that process, right? So basically what we did is we brought people in and gave them a resource and tailored it to like, hey, this is what I do. I'm around the corner. I want to help, and I don't want gun owners to be afraid to come to me. And everything that we cover in the course is everything from the difference between the calibers of firearms to the AR debate. It's really fascinating most people have an opinion on ARs. Most people have never touched an AR that have that opinion, especially on the anti side. Right. So it's really fun to kind of get them in a classroom setting, or at least in the video setting, where they can actually hear an argument and understand why that argument to ban ARs is problematic for gun owners. And I always say there's a part in there where I say banning ARs because you think you're going to stop mass shootings or negative outcomes of firearms is like literally someone saying, we're going to stop drunk driving by banning red sports cars. And we pose things to make it make sense for a person who doesn't know anything about firearms. That's the cultural competence course. And like I said, you can go on there and see the different kind of chapters. A lot of it as a gun owner, you are going to say like, I could teach this part, and you got to remember who that course is for. That audience is for the person that doesn't really know anything about guns, maybe anti-gun or gun neutral, but wants to be enlightened. And, think about any other group of people. You take the LGBTQ community, right? For many years, there were clinicians that didn't know how to even handle that type of person because they're like, I'm not in that lifestyle. It's like, well, you don't have to practice the lifestyle to understand it. You don't have to be a gun owner to literally understand gun people. You just have to take the cultural competence course and be open to new ideas and also see different thought process. And I think that's what it does. I'm very proud of that course. Like I said, we started in 2019, and we get people that take it weekly because you can take it anytime you want. So that's the cultural competence course for healthcare providers. And what we've done from there is the healthcare providers that come through and really want to be involved with Walk the Talk America, and they take the cultural competence course, and they take both of them that are online. We have a directory, and if they want to be listed in the directory, then we'll put you up there. And what I want to do is create an army of gun owning mental health care providers that are not afraid to say, I'm pro 2A or I'm culturally competent in firearms. Like, you can come to me if you're a gun owner, don't worry. And then what we do is we like to link them up to the local gun shops, which helps create connectiveness between the gun shops and the healthcare providers, right? Because as gun people, we know that gun shops are told, we look for that, right? We don't want to sell someone a firearm when they're in distress, so they're not in a good mental health space. So it helps the gun shop owner to say like, okay, I got a guy or I got a therapist, a lady down the street that's pro gun that I know that I can bounce ideas off of her and I can work with her and I can send my customers there if they need it. And I'm not sending them into some place where they're going to have their rights restricted or be judged. So that's what the course is for.
I mean, that's absolutely awesome. Another course that you mentioned that was that intrigued me was the inner city youth course. What does that one entail?
So Kids to Kings is an idea that came up from Devin Perkins. Devin Perkins was interviewing me in 2018 or 19. And I remember he flat out asked me, he was like, are you doing anything for the Black community? Devin is obviously African-American. And he asked me that. And I said, no, I'm just doing what I'm doing for gun owners. I said, you should do something because nobody needs another white hero. And it was kind of a joke, but I was just like, nobody likes The Blind Side. And I remember saying that in 2019, nobody likes the Blind Side movie. It's total BS. And, it's funny, cut to in 2024. Look at how people feel about that movie, The Blind Side. So I was ahead of my time on that one. But he took that and he came back to me and he said, I think I have a program that I would like to run through Walk the Talk America if you'd be interested. And he presented it to me. And basically what he said is, I want to go straight to underprivileged, underserved communities. I want to take a group of kids and I want to put them through a course. And when I say a course, it's not a one-time, it's not a one-off thing. So like when you enroll in the Kids to Kings program, you are like a member of it. And what he does is he throws events for these kids. And during these events, he talks about complex trauma and CPTSD, all the things that community, right, may not have access to the information about, or nobody tells them about something. And I'm going to tell a quick story here to kind of put it in perspective, right? I remember, through my travels and all these endeavors that I'm doing with Walk Talk America, I was able to talk to this gentleman out of Oakland, and we were talking about violence in the inner city. And at one point he was just like, Mike, I hear these kids in Parkland and, they're doing the March for Our Lives thing. And he says, yeah, I appreciate that they're afraid to go to school. Like, I get it, But he's like, where I'm from, kids aren't afraid in school. Kids aren't afraid at home. It's getting from home to school is where they're terrified, because that's where they're walking over to the dead bodies of their friends or getting caught in drive-bys, all that stuff, right? And that really resonated with me because it's like, okay, it's a whole different, and we talked about this earlier in a previous interview where we said, like, when you lump gun violence under one umbrella, nothing's going to get done. The same solution for suicide is not the same solution for inner city youth issues with firearms, right? We both know that.
and the same solution for hunter safety or all that. I mean, there's a million and 1 angles, and so many people try to just put it all in one nutshell. You're absolutely correct. Yeah.
So what we did is we said, okay, what's the best way to get to the youth? What's the way to get to the future, right? In many ways, in underprivileged, underserved communities, you need a firearm. You need a firearm for so many reasons that like someone like me might not, right? And my kids, but we don't care what that reason is. We're not here to judge that. What we want you to do is have an opportunity to be introduced to firearms in a healthy manner, not learn it from a damn video, not learn it from a song, right? Understand your emotions, understand what you're going through, what you're feeling, and give hope to somebody. I know this is going to sound corny as hell. It totally is. But the reason why I never smoked cigarettes is because I looked up to a kid in my high school. He was a little older than me. I remember the first time I thought I was going to impress him. I had a cigarette. I remember he looked at me and he was like, man, we don't need that stuff. Like, why are you doing that? Right. And he was a tough guy. And I remember that changed the course of my life, right? Like it changed the course of how I felt about cigarettes. And it stuck with me because he kind of pulled me out of that. Like, don't do something to try to impress people that's negative. Like, you don't need that. And that's how I feel that this course is for a lot of kids. It's giving kids a chance to express themselves, talk about what's going on in their life, understand how to address it. And at that same time, they're getting educated about firearm safety, which I think is super important. I think we got away from that as a country. And I don't, it just so happens that this course is directed towards inner city youth, but I don't care where you come from. I don't care if you grew up in the mountains and you're hunting. Like, education when it comes to firearms, healthy education when it comes to firearms is super important. And I think it's super important for the future of the Second Amendment. The more youth shooters we get out there, it's almost having like little firearms instructors out there, right? That are going to continue the message. And they're also going to be able to know what to do when they come across a gun. One of the crazy things, another little anecdotal story about this is the very first time we threw this course in Atlanta. I remember Devin asked the kids, hey, how many of you have access to a firearm? And every single kid in the class raised their hand. These are 12, 13-year-olds. Like, I don't care, once again, the reason why. I probably know it, right? Like, they have a cousin who's out there doing, in the streets, whatever. But what we have to understand is if we don't teach these kids about one in the chamber, or we don't teach these kids how to be responsible, then we're just going to add to the negative outcomes of firearms that are going to be used against us anyways. So I want to walk into the room, and when they're like, well, you don't care about what's going on in Chicago, just sell more guns. It's like, no, actually we do. Let me tell you why. Let me show you why. And let me show you why we do it better than you. And that's what Kids to Kings is in a nutshell. It's hope, it's opportunity, and it's literally introducing firearms in a healthy manner to kids.
I mean, that's awesome. I mean, I 100% agree with you. I think that every public school should be teaching age-appropriate gun safety things because, again, we have the right to own firearms, and so therefore, ignorance shouldn't even be available to anybody. Everybody should be learning, not necessarily from any partisan sense, but it sounds like until that happens, and everybody contact your Congress people. But until that happens on the national stage, we have Walk the Talk America. So
let me give you one more. Can I give you one more?
Oh, please.
Okay, last one. The firearms instructor mental health resource videos, and I think this is important because this movement in gun culture, right? We are moving towards being the leaders in this space. Over the years, I've had more firearms instructors contact me and say, hey, I want to give out your free and anonymous mental health screening flyers to my class, or I want to give out your wristbands, right? We have these wristbands, right? If you're a firearms instructor and you want this material, we send it out for free. That's part of what we do. If you own a gun shop, we send it out for free. All you got to do is contact us and say hey, I want the flyer and I want your stickers and I want this stuff because I want to put it out in the shop or give it to my students. But we're seeing more and more states move to mandatory mental health and suicide prevention curriculum being put into the firearms instructor's course to get your CCW. So what was happening in certain states like California and Maryland and New York is you had firearms instructors turning around saying to the state, hey, I want you to do this, or you want us to do this. What do you want from us? What do you want us to hit? And the states were literally going, we don't know. We just want you to talk about it. So what we did is we said, okay, we already have this movement of instructors wanting to be involved in the conversation and wanting to talk to their students about this stuff. Let's make an online free resource course that literally all you have to do is hit play if you're not comfortable talking about mental health and suicide prevention. These are firearms instructors. They're not mental health professionals. Now we want them to talk about mental health and suicide prevention, right? That doesn't make sense. Now, firearms instructors are very smart people. So our theory was, let's make it easy for them. Let's let them hit play. And then after about 2 times of playing this video, they're going to be able to teach this stuff themselves, right? That's the whole movement, right? And force multipliers, right? We want more and more firearms people talking about this stuff in an educated manner to almost light up the competition, right? Like, we'll do it better than you, going back to that. But we broke it up into chapters, right? And like chapter 1 is the introduction. Chapter 2 is understanding your mental functioning. Chapter 3 is responsible storage. Chapter 4 is knowing your biases. Chapter 5 is access. Chapter 6 is resources to improve your mental health. And then we have an outro, right? And you can cherry pick what you want to show your class and then just say to the students, hey, to watch the whole video or whatever. Or you can just play the whole video in general. But what this does is it empowers the firearms instructor to have that little bit of knowledge to be able to pass it down to their students to say, hey, you're a gun owner. The reason why you're taking this class is you have a responsibility. You have a responsibility to learn the safety rules, to understand your firearm, to understand what happens in defensive shooting. You know we just can't shoot somebody, even if we're 100% in the right, if someone's breaking into our house, without knowing the law and knowing what is going to come down upon us after that incident happens, right? But now we're adding that third element as a gun owner. And what do we love the most as gun people? We love to brag about how prepared we are. We love to brag about how we train, staying vigilant, hyper awareness. As a gun owner, having a mental health plan and a suicide prevention plan for when that time comes, whether it's you that's in crisis or your kid that's in crisis, say your teenage daughter is just going through a bad breakup. Okay, we have guns around the house. We need to have a plan. We need to make sure that they're secure. Or I'm not doing so well. I'm going to say to my wife, like, hey, you know me better than anyone else. If I'm going through it, let's implement our suicide prevention plan until I'm better. Crisis is temporary. So this plan could be a 2-day plan, right? Or it could be a 6-hour plan or however you need. But as a gun owner, we need to start getting in that space to where like, okay, we've thought about this. We've thought this through, that if the day comes where I'm not doing so well, or my friend isn't doing so well, or my spouse isn't doing so well, that we have a plan for it. And that's what this firearms instructor course really, resonates with a lot of people.
I mean, that's absolutely awesome. I mean, we're definitely putting something that's been labeled on gun owners by the anti-gun people is that we don't care and that we are heartless and we're selfish and we love our guns more than we love dead kids or whatever they want to say. And we all know that that's not true. And I got to tell you, I think you're proving it. So thank you so much for coming on the show. Michael Sodini of Walk the Talk America.
Thank you for having me.
He really is doing the Lord's work.
He makes me feel completely inadequate.
I mean, it's just like there are a handful of people, who they are in our industry that are not the greatest people in the world, and we're not huge fans of them. And then there's even people like Larry Vickers, who's had a whole career of really, really good work, both for the U.S. military and as a trainer and a firearms historian and that sort of stuff. And apparently he made some really, really bad choices, hence his felony conviction, and all that. So I don't asperge his character for that, just his judgment. But so many of the people that we meet in this industry just have hearts of gold. And the Walk the Talk America is no different.
Asperge is a word now?
Is it not?
I don't think that it is. Okay, funny enough, it is a word, but it doesn't mean what you meant it to mean. To asperge is to sprinkle, especially with holy water. I understand how you got there because, to cast aspersions.
Yes.
The verb for that is disparage. The more you know. Well, Weer'd, whether we asparage or disparage the people that we aren't going to do either one to, are our listeners.
Our listeners, yes. Thanks to each and every one of you guys. We really appreciate you tuning in for this fine episode of the Assorted Calibers podcast. But we'd also like to give a special thanks to all our supporters on Patreon. To be a Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers podcast to sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast, plus bonus content like the hilarious blooper reels. I just finished making one just before we started. The ACP film tracks, and the ACP mag dump.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
I've got a blog. It's called weerdworld.com. That's WEERD world.com. And here we weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
I mean, is it really a blog if all you do is post the show notes for the podcast?
You know what? I had a great plan for something that would work only in my blog, and I've just had no time to do it. I care about the podcast. I only have so much time, and it's podcasting that I truly love.
Well, you can get more from me at my blog, and it's not that it's much better, but I do original writing there when I can find the time, motivation, and my rear end. But you can get more from me at linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Aaron Paulette, all one word. I don't know why I turned it into an air raid siren, but I did.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
He's Beetlejuice to my Lydia. Our aesthetic is assorted, and so's our podcast. Good night, everyone.
Good night.